prepared this memo based upon, actually it's my opinion. I reviewed the recommendations of RIOC, both with respect to the actual amounts of money that were recommended to each of the not-for-profits, as well as the percentage that was actually recommended as compared to the amounts that were requested by the not-for-profits. I then viewed the amount that was recommended for Carter Burton, and before I received the letter from Mr. Dion, I felt it was unfair. I actually felt that, and again, this is my personal belief, that based upon my interactions with Carter Burton, which are many, I'm often there for events, and often Lisa Fernandez and I, the director of Carter Burton, often have meetings in support of the seniors and events for the seniors, programs for the seniors. We've talked and worked together. I think they've done an impressive job for our community, both as Bill said, in terms of increasing the number of seniors that they serve, as well as their programs. And I think, I wasn't at the RIOC meeting where these recommendations were made, but I think there's often a belief, oh, they're a big company and they must have a lot of money and they don't need our money. Well, in fact, they're doing a lot and they do need the money. They're unfunded for the very many programs that they want to do. So I thought that the easiest way to bring fairness to this situation was if every single one of the recipients of these grants would kick in 5%, it wouldn't hurt anyone too much, and yet it would kick up Carter Burton's grant to about 50%, which is not that different from others. Other entities got more than 50% of what they requested, and I don't think a 5% reduction would be a dramatic injury to any one of the other grantees. So that was my recommendation, and I seek the board's approval.
I'm a member of the Senior Association, and I wonder if their relationship with Carter Burton means I have to recuse myself from this discussion or vote.
I don't believe that your membership is anything financial. I don't believe you have any financial benefit. I don't think you have any voting control over the Roosevelt Island Senior Association, or that the Roosevelt Island Senior Association has anything to do with the Carter Burton receiving funds.
And just remember, I have to renew my membership to the seniors this week.
Well, that you should do anyway.
I was just curious, glancing at the list of RIOC's recommendations against the various organizations' requests, and I see also that while most of the organizations were granted from a little below half to more than 3/4 of the money that they requested, 30 to 50 against 20 grand is about 16.5% that we were recommended for Carter Burton program. And I'm wondering why see, it took us so long to get to the point where RIOC would be making these recommendations, and based on their knowledge of community needs. And even when I haven't necessarily agreed with their choices in the past, I thought it was a matter of good faith with RIOC that we would pass the recommendations. And I don't think, barring some exceptional situations in past years, we've generally voted along RIOC's recommendations. This is a situation where we're just flat out refusing RIOC's recommendations. And before I'm in a position to make a decision on that, I really would like some more information about why Rira's committee chose to make such a deep cut in the Carter Burden recommendation. Is there someone here who can explain that to me?
Okay, this time I understand the question, and I apologize again to,
David, I should tell you,
pardon?
one of my hearing aids is not functioning today, so
Okay, you want me to turn to you and,
speak sharp and loud,
and direct the mic?
and somewhere around the baritone, please.
I will direct it to you. Your question is why? Why? Well, it's actually a good question. The committee is on the firing line, and we're not innovative on the committee. We have established guidelines, we have criteria that we don't share with applicants. We follow the rules as they are established to the best of our ability. So I think I can speak that there was no ill will, there was no intentional, no discrimination, certainly no intentional discrimination against any applicant. Now, do I feel good about the outcome because we're basing it upon metrics? Of course I don't. I'm about as senior as you are, David. And I grew up in a senior home because my parents were very active in the senior center when they were in our state. So I don't know if there's more I can say. I don't want to get into modalities. That's up to the responsible officer in RIOC to describe the metrics or the criteria that we're given to use, and then it becomes numerical.
Let me ask you another question, if I may. In terms of the recommendation of taking what percentage from each of the, how much?
5%.
Now I need an opinion. Do you think your committee would be satisfied or pleased or displeased if we vote this thing forward with a 5% reduction in all your recommendations?
I have no pride of authorship. I'm not selfish. I am for the community. And I think it's your discretion. If you wish to do that, I certainly have no objection. I'm not going to publish any objection. I'm not going to speak of any objection. I'm just going to follow orders. That's what a good troop does.
I would like to make a comment to what you said, David. It is RIOC's duty to grant these grants to the community. These are just recommendations by RIOC. And I think at the end of the day, it is our responsibility. It is not just we are not just rubber stamps.
And your point?
My point is, I do think we want to hear what the community has to say. That's why this was set in place. But I don't think that means we have to go and agree with their determination or recommendation if on its face, at least to me, it doesn't seem to make a lot of sense. Just with respect to this one grant.
Well,
I'm not questioning any of the other grants.
So I would just say, I think it's David makes a good point, because what strikes me here is the initial recommendation is so low in comparison with the request, in comparison to all the others, that obviously before we as a board, alter it, I think it is good to hear from you. Was there a particular reason why out of all of these applicants, this one was treated this way? They asked for 20,000, you gave them 3. All the others were much closer. And if what you're saying is, look, we used the metrics that we were given, it came out to this for, through the process that you went through, and if now the board decides that they're going to make an adjustment so that this grant is going to be substantially increased versus what RIOC was recommending, you as the representative of RIOC don't have any reason to believe that that's an unreasonable action by the board.
No, I don't. I think it's, at the end of the day, it's the board's discretion. Once again, we go through a process We try to be as fair as we can. Quite frankly, I don't look at the numbers per se. We have open session presentations to the committee. The committee debates. The committee follows the procedures that are set out. Now, I'm going to go a little further and say that if you ask me, and I think you're asking me, that's what I heard, could there be some adjustments made that could in fact perhaps result in a fairer numerical number? I don't know what that number is or what percentage is, but certainly it does appear like an aberration to have one applicant out of 10 that's on the low end. I could speculate why that happened, but I'm not going to do that here.
Okay.
One thing I just want to reiterate is the reason why we're having all this back and forth is because in this instance of public purpose funds, part of the reason for this discussion and debate was to try to include as much as possible the community's input. And there's so few times in this organization where you actually get to do that. We're soliciting your input. We're actually, we are spending this time soliciting your input to find out, to make sure that we're doing the best that we can to facilitate what the community wants. That's why we're asking all these questions. Because we could have just voted on it and not bothered to bring you up and gone with it. We wanted to make it together.
I see that the president of RIOC is in the room, and she is by definition the voice of the Residents Association. And I wonder if she has an opinion about whether we should accept the recommendations or change them.
May I make a comment before Madam President makes a comment? Actually, this was not done on her watch. I just want to make clear that, okay? This was not done on her watch. Madam President was the incoming president.
Well, I was speaking to the larger question of regardless whose watch it was done on. I've always accepted the recommendations of your committee, with, again, a caveat, there are a few situations that developed in the past, and we had to hold up on payment and things like that. But this is an across-the-board renunciation or modification of viewers' expressed view. And as a former president of the Residents Association, I've always been very protective of RIOC. I have never taken a public statement of any kind in opposition to RIOC, even when RIOC committees were making public statements in opposition to me. The power of RIOC to represent the people of this community is pretty sacrosanct, in my personal opinion. But that's my opinion. If nobody from RIOC, not just committee representation, weren't these voted on in the general session of RIOC?
Yes.
Look,
Yes, they were.
well, it's a rejection of a RIOC proposal. And I would say that well, I have a thought that's critical in the wrong direction. I'm not opposed in principle to Susan's recommendation of how to expand funding, require a burden of very little cost to other island agencies. And of course, I'm cognizant the final responsibility is ours. But as a member of this board, my final responsibility is towards the maintenance of this community and this town. And I've been doing it since a lot of you guys showed up on this rock, and a lot of you are going to be gone from this rock, and I'll still be here with the job of defending the community to the best of my limited ability against anything. And so before I vote for this, I have to be assured that RIOC, not just the committee, that RIOC is in agreement or disagreement with this proposal.
I'm sorry, this proposal meaning, as it stands or?
The
or
adjustment proposal.
selected
The adjustment we're gonna vote on.
The adjustment.
Yes.
Well, Mr. Crowd, if you wanna call the current president to the podium. If you wanna call the current president to the podium to answer the question. That's one president to another, or former president to another. I have to recuse on that issue.
Well, the adjustment is reasonable and modest, and so if someone moves it, I'll vote for it.
I'd like to say that I'm in favor of it also, but I appreciate that RIOC is in a difficult position. You have an accelerated schedule to come up with these proposals. How many people were on the review committee?
4.
4 people. How many what's the typical membership of RIOC? 40?
At the offset, we have a robust, group, around 40, maybe plus 2 or 3.
So I'm in favor of these adjustments. I'm also of the mind that we should review what sounds to be an aberration in the scoring results, maybe from your perspective, that this anomaly occurred, and have a longer and more cautious review for the next round of public purpose grants. I also note that these grants are for a year that ends March 31st, 2019. And so we just voted to extend grants for 2 of the organizations that are getting new grants here. Maybe not at this meeting, but soon we'll probably make extensions for those. We do that because we want to have flexibility in what we offer the community, and the ability of these organizations to channel funds to members of the community as a community benefit. I feel that this modification, moving funds into Carter Burton's hands, is a way of assuring a segment of the population is getting grants through that means. All these monies are meant to help the community, and so this is just tilting it a little bit in what we perceive as a more fair direction.
Is that a motion, Mr. Pollock?
Well, I noticed that the Bureau President is here, perhaps she'll say some
So-
words.
I'd just like to say that I concur with what Howard was saying in terms of reviewing the process. And that I concur with Howard in terms of reviewing the process and how we are working with one another going forward. So I agree with you on that.
Well, thank you, and I'll make the motion.